Professor Nirmala, Coordinator DST CPR, to formally welcome our speakers, the returning participants as well as the new participants. Professor Nirmala, please.
Thank you, Dr. Mansimran. Good afternoon to all, and my warm welcome to all faculty members, research scholars, students, ladies and gentlemen, to the second day of our workshop series on patent search and filing, the roadway to IP commercialization. And I especially welcome the two speakers, Dr. Deepa Tikku, who has been long associated with our center. She has given last year, in 2019, she has delivered a lecture in the university. But this is our first time I'm meeting you, ma'am, because I've just taken over as a coordinator. And we do hope for your further collaborations with your firm. And we look forward to a well network. And yesterday, as Mansimran had just mentioned, this is our second day. And yesterday, Miss Divya Kaushik and Dr. Kavita Bansal, they gave a good start to the workshop because they started with the basics and they introduced the audience to intellectual property and also how to file patents and to maintain, which was very good for the young upcoming researchers because they are just going to start their work. And to carry forward the series, we have today two interesting topics which will be delivered by Dr. Deepa Tikku from KS Partners, Gurgaon, and Rima Sahni. We have been working with. We have already organized another webinar before this. She is also a very active member and project manager of ITTO, FITT, IT Delhi. And Dr. Deepa Tikku, she is a very look forward to these very interesting discussions. Mansimran, you can take over.
So I'll just begin introducing Dr. Tikku again. She's a partner at KNS Partners, an IP boutique law firm. She's a doctorate in the field of biotechnology and also holds a degree in law. Dr. Tikku specializes in advising domestic as well as international clients on patent drafting, enforcement of patents, freedom to operate, due diligence, technology transfer, and licensing, especially in the field of life sciences. Dr. Tikku has been practicing in the field of patent law for more than 15 years now, and she has to her credit 21 granted patents worldwide and several publications. Dr. Tikku is a regular speaker at various IP fora and works on IP policy related issues as well. She is a recipient of the Global Excellence Awards 2018 as the most influential woman in biotech patent law in India and has also been awarded the Global IP Star 2018. She's been associated with our center since 2016 and has always obliged gladly to all our invitations and guided us immensely in the domain of patents. Thank you so much, ma'am, for accepting our invitation this time as well. It is a delight to hear you always. Ma'am, please.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mansimran. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are.
Okay. So first of all, thank you, Dr. Nirmala, Dr. Mamta, and for giving me this opportunity again to come to this platform and share my thoughts and some knowledge that I have gained over the years in this area. My association with DST Center, this particular forum is obviously a few years old, but my association with Punjab University is pretty old. And as I had said in my last interaction, during my master's time back in the late 90s, I have done my master's in biotech from Patiala, from Punjabi University, Patiala. But during that time, we used to have a lot of interaction with Punjab University, Chandigarh as well, because many of our faculty members would come from there, or we would go to the Punjab University to get our classes done. It was one of those early batches of biotech which had started, and I was among the first few students of biotech those days. So I've had some very great memories of Punjab University, and I feel delighted to be back and talking to some students and as well as hopefully some faculty members as well. And I hope to ignite some curiosity today, not only to answer or to share my knowledge, but also to ignite some curiosity, to ignite some interest in this area as well to the members who are attending this seminar today. The topic that has been given to me is of patent opposition and enforcement. Now, these are little complicated topics because these are little advanced, in terms of their flavor, and might seem a little dry to the audience if they're not really into the area of patent and have not handled a lot of things. So I'm not very sure about the depth of the existing knowledge that this audience has. It'll be great if some of you can type in your raise your hands or tell me about what is the kind of knowledge or any kind of experience that you have so far in this area. It will be really helpful for me to kind of delve on a certain aspect or leave another aspect apart. Having said that, I will just give a quick overview. I don't want to go very deep into it, but these are a little dry topics for people who may not be doing this on an everyday basis. So with that disclaimer, I will start my presentation, and I encourage you to please type in your comments and questions and keep telling me that you are really listening to what I'm saying. You are not sleeping behind the virtual walls. These are very different kind of platforms. I'll be very happy to know that you're listening and you're still interested in hearing me out. So, Mamta, should I start my presentation?
Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead. Thank you.
All right. So I will have to present in the presenting mode. Fine. So let us just begin with what patent rights actually entail. In India, we have a patent law which provides a monopoly for 20 years. I hope that this is known to people as much as now you have gone through some of the sessions yesterday as well. Now, so 20 years, it's basically a kind of a monopoly that the government provides to the patentee for a limited period of time. And in return, it is a quid pro quo. In return, the patentee is supposed to make this information public. Your invention is supposed to be made public so that the general public can gain not only from the data, etc., that is given there, but also from the research perspective. The researchers who are working in this area get access to the latest research which has happened and is covered under the patent, the new products that could be launched, the new processes that could be coming up. So this is a quid pro quo, and after the 20-year term is finished, it comes into the public domain for everyone to use and benefit from. So it's basically for the society's benefit. In India also, the mindset has always been that, because this is a monopolistic right, in a way that it is a negative right, and you can prevent others from using or selling or manufacturing any of the materials, products or processes that you're covering under your patent. There should be some checks and balances, because you don't want in a country like India, which is so economically disparate, should not be a kind of a attitude where people are always getting sued in the courts, or people don't have access to something which is covered by the patent for this period of time, especially in some very sensitive sectors like agriculture, food, pharmaceuticals, and so on. So under the Act, there are some checks and balances which I want to set forth at the very beginning, where the government, the Act, the lawmakers have ensured that nobody just keeps the patent in a drawer under a monopoly and prevents anybody else from using those. The patents are actually to be made available to the public. The technology that is there in the patent has to be made available for the 20 years by the patentee, and later to be made free for the public to use. Now, there is no presumption of validity. Now, what does this mean? Validity would mean that once you have got a patent, it is valid for the rest of the 20 years. Nobody can oppose, nobody can question your patent, nobody can question the rights that you are getting under it. But in India, there is no presumption of validity, even if you have a granted patent. So for this, it means that after you have got your patent granted, after all the years of toil and turmoil and all the hard work that you may have done to get a patent granted, it is still open for third parties to get it invalidated in the courts. Okay, and it's in the tribunals and the courts. And also, so you will always have to prove the validity of the patent if there is a question raised against it. Therefore, the very need for having a very strong patent, a very strong, well-drafted specification, well-crafted claims, a review of the prior art done well, where you have the searches done very properly, and you feel that, and you have to ensure that you're not overstepping on the prior art. You may skip all of that during prosecution, and you may get a granted patent, but a third party can always throw surprising prior art even later. Therefore, the drafting and prior art search becomes a very, very important step in this. And how are all these obstacles for the grant and after the grant grounds which are listed in the Act? And it comes up before the controller, and then there are proceedings. So we'll come to that in a bit in detail. The next step is the post-grant opposition, which happens after the grant. Once your patent is granted, there is no pre-grant opposition. Everything is done. Your claims are accepted, and your patent is granted. It opens a window for post-grant opposition. But this window is limited for 1 year, and only a person interested. Now, these terms are maybe a little bit of a jargon to you people, but for those who are not able to understand, these are terms which are defined in the Act. So any person would mean any person, literally any person, but an interested person, and what could be the interest of that person in that has to be justified. Not everybody or anybody can just file it for the heck of it. The person who's opposing has to showcase the locus, the real interest, or what is the damage that is happening to that person or an entity if the patent continues to remain granted. So this is the post-grant opposition. So there are two types of oppositions, pre and post. This is very unique in India, and these are all very full-fledged proceedings. Like in Europe also, you have a proceeding before the grant. That's called the third-party representation proceeding. There, somebody can oppose, but they can just simply communicate it to the European Patent Office, and they say that this is a third-party representation against the grant of this particular application. However, in that case, there is no proceeding which is an exhaustive proceeding. That examiner may look at that particular opposition and see if there is anything to be considered. Based on that, might grant the patent or get it amended or whatever. But in India, it is a full-fledged proceeding where both parties are involved, the opponent as well as the applicant. So these are oppositions. And these oppositions have come into place after 2005, when the Act got amended, and we opened up the window to the whole world for all kinds of patents in India. Before that, only process patents would get granted. Last on this slide is the revocation. So even after the 1 year period is over, after grant, as I said, you don't have a patent validity system in India that once your patent is granted, it is valid. Even after that, an interested person, anytime after grant, till the full term of the patent, can file a request for revocation, application for revocation, and this can be filed at the appellate board, intellectual property appellate board. So these proceedings are different from the patent office proceedings. So opposition proceedings happen in the patent office, revocation proceedings happen in the IPAB. And the last is the counterclaim. Now, this is, of course, in a patent infringement action. When we come to patent enforcement, we'll talk a little bit about the infringement part. So when a defendant is sued in the court, then the defendant usually files a counterclaim, says that your patent only is invalid. Why are you suing me? So the court, it asks the court to invalidate the patent itself, this is kind of a defense for them. So this is another, so there's a possibility of counterclaim, right? So now we come to specifically to patent oppositions in a little bit of a detail. Please type in keep typing your questions and confusions that you may have so far, and let me know if I'm going fast. And Mamta, please also alert me on the time. I may not be able to finish this whole thing in 30 minutes, but I'll try my best. So this
Sure.
we have already covered. This we have already covered when I spoke about, you know, how the patent applications are filed, they get published, then you have the pre-grant opposition window till the grant, and then you have the post-grant opposition window. And after that, you have the filing of a revocation, possibility of filing of a revocation petition by an interested party. But one thing that we have to understand here is that we have had recently several orders where, because some people, you know, sometimes what has happened is that multiple proceedings are taking place. So an opponent files a pre-grant opposition. If it fails in the pre-grant opposition, it files a post-grant opposition. If it fails in the post-grant opposition, it goes for multiple it goes for revocation, as well as some counterclaim is also filed. So to avoid these multiple actions, courts have come very heavily and they have said that you have to choose one. You cannot have multiple proceedings in a given case. So that's come as somewhat of a breather for the patentees in India. Now, who can file? I said that any person can file. For a pre-grant opposition, any person can file. But for post-grant, you know, person interested. And revocation, of course, is person interested. Pre-grant is any time before grant, but not before the expiry of 6 months from 18-month publication. Post-grant is any time 1 year, and revocation till expiry. Just a little bit of a differentiation in the table here, though it is the same thing that I have already talked about. But you have to see the, you know, the ease of filing a pre-grant for anybody, you know, is so stark. So there is no fees here. Okay, there is no fees and any person can go and file. That means your patent is subject to a kind of a proceeding where you are at the mercy of a third party, and they can raise even frivolous opposition against your patent application. Therefore, the key is to look out for competitors in your area to see if your patent application has been pending for a long time. There is always a chance that a third party or your competitor can come and file a pre-grant opposition. And for the post-grant opposition, again, obviously, if you have a granted patent, you are in the market, you are commercial, you know that you might have competitors around you, or you may have other third parties who may not want your patent to sustain because they are in the competing business and you are likely to sue them. So this is also as a defensive approach for a defendant to actually kill your patent at the very outset. As a proceeding, you know, this is anyway may not be that important for you, but the fee thing I've told you, there is no fee. Other thing that is there is that, you know, there are 11 grounds under the Act in the pre-grant opposition proceedings as well as the post-grant opposition proceeding. There is just minor tweaking in the post-grant opposition grounds. However, these are the grounds. These are the only grounds on which an opponent can file the opposition. No separate or additional ground beyond what is listed in those in the Act can be taken by any opponent. So these are limited to those statutory grounds, and the grounds could be, for example, that the patent subject matter claims are not novel, they are not inventive, they don't fall within the patentability criteria set out by Section 3 of the Act. So they are wrongfully obtained. So many of those grounds are there where which can be used by the opponent. Now, representation includes a detailed statement of opposition, where the grounds and the support for that, by how they are relying and what is the substantial evidence that they are taking to invoke those grounds. Some of the affidavits can be filed by opponent to support their case, and also there can be a request for hearing. Then, as I said, the notice of the controller will review this, then it will issue a notice, and the reply has to be submitted by the applicant within 3 months from the date of that notice. And the hearing will take place because you will obviously, when you submit your reply, you will ask for hearing before any adverse decision is taken. And normally, as per the rules, within 1 month, you should get a decision, but practically it doesn't happen because there are a lot of backlog at the patent office and the controllers are often very burdened with this, and these get complicated. So you may get decisions even within a year or beyond that as well. as I said, pre-grant oppositions can often be misused by third parties, and by filing multiple oppositions. So you can have proxy opponents, kind of together, and they will file one after another few oppositions to derail your grant. So these are somewhat tricky, and you have to be on the lookout for making sure that your patent gets smoothly granted. These are some important case laws on pre-grant opposition. These are some landmark case laws where some question of law, some position of law was finalized. I don't want to get into the details of it, but because I don't think we'll have so much time, I will pass on the presentation and you guys can look at it. If you have any questions, you can come back to me. So that's not a problem. These are some of the statistics related to the pre-grant oppositions, and these are last 10-year data. If you see, there is a remarkable improvement in the speed of disposal of pre-grant oppositions. So 426 oppositions were filed in the year 1819 and 399 were disposed as per the annual report. So this is what we have to rely upon, but I'm also very surprised to see such a huge jump in the disposal rate as compared to last year's. Now then we come to the post-grant opposition proceedings. These are slightly different from pre-grant. This also has a form. This has a fees, of course. Again, the written statement along with evidence has to be there. Reply statement has to be filed. Reply with evidence has to be filed rather. So you have to rebut the opponent's grounds and all the evidences that they may have filed. And this has to be done. And then along with that, then the hearing, before the hearing takes place, an opposition board is constituted by the patent office, where it has a board where they have separate, they don't have that board does not have the examiner and the controller who has been examining this case. They have a separate board who reviews the issues, and they are providing a recommendation from their end. And these recommendations have to be also made available to the parties. This is as per the Supreme Court order recently, last couple of years back. And before that, even the patent office would not give these recommendations to the parties. Now they give the recommendations, and then there is a hearing. Now in the hearing, both parties have to be present, and they have to present their case before the patent office, and then decision can take place, practically in 2-3 years it can happen. And in the meantime, other people can also file. So we have had personally, practically in our office, several cases where we are dealing with 8 oppositions, 9 oppositions, 10 oppositions in a given case. So especially in the area of pharmaceuticals. So that is something that you may want to consider. This is some statistics around post-grant opposition. So you can see the post-grant oppositions are little less than the pre-grant, and for the very same reason that there has to be some locus. There has to be an interested person who can file the post-grant, and in the pre-grant the numbers are high. And as you can imagine, that they could be frivolous oppositions filed against the patent application in these cases. Briefly about revocation, as I said, that after the opposition period has finished, your patent can even get revoked before the IPAB. So a third party can file a revocation petition on the grounds which are listed under Section 64 of the Patents Act, only on those grounds, and then they can file the petition before the IPAB, and you can participate in the hearing and give your evidences, counter evidences, etc., and arguments to defend your case over there. And these are the grounds which are all available in the opposition grounds as well, but there are some additional grounds as well for this. In these cases also, there have been several important cases which have set up some landmark points of law for the issues of revocation. So till now, if you have any questions, please let me know, and then we start the next part of this presentation, which is on the enforcement of patents. So Mamta, if there is anything, because I cannot see the chat box while the presentation is on, there are any questions, we can settle them now, or if you want them to be later.
Ma'am, there are 2 questions. One says, is there any limit to the number of oppositions, and is it mandatory for the patentee to address all the oppositions? It's a long question, I'll continue. Does the controller have direct power to reject some of the oppositions on different grounds?
Very good questions. So for the first question, answer is no, there is no limit on the number of oppositions that can be filed. That is precisely the reason there are delays in the grants, because many time what happens is that in some critical cases where there are opponents, they are even colluding together. There are many opponents which could be colluding together and filing series of oppositions. So I have dealt with a lot of oppositions, where in the initial days when this system came into place, it was berserk. People were all over the place filing oppositions. So just when we were in the hearing proceeding and you were hoping that now the hearing will be over and the grant will take place or whatever the matter will be decided, you receive another opposition. And just when the hearing takes place, another opposition. So there was a cascading effect for this. So no, there is no limit, and that is a bit of a problem. There is no limit. Second question was around the direct power of the controller.
Yes, and there was one that is it mandatory for patentee to address all the oppositions?
Yeah. So as per the law, the point is that if the notice has been served to you by the patent office, if the patent office has informed you that a opposition has been received by the patent office, you have to respond to the opponent. If you do not respond, it will be taken as that you're no longer interested in the patent itself, and the application can get abandoned, or the patent office will issue a decision on the basis of whatever is the merit on the record, and they will give a decision. So the opponents normally say that we are doing this only to benefit the controller, so that the controller is able to give a good decision in the matter and not grant frivolous. So these are the kind of psychological influences that opponents sometimes use for the controller. And though it is also connected to the third part now, so therefore the second answer is that the patentee in his own interest will always have to respond to these oppositions. They cannot not take an action against this. Okay. The third question is on the controller's power. The act says that once the controller has received a opposition, a pre-grant opposition, and the controller is reviewed the case and is convinced that this opposition should be passed on to the applicant, he does so. But in practice, and because of several case laws, in the interest of natural justice on both sides, no controller will keep the opposition with him. Right. Will ensure that this is communicated to the applicant for procedure.
Right, ma'am. And ma'am, there's a continuing question which says, what strategy should a patentee follow in case of multiple oppositions by the competing party?
Yeah, right. So, really it is very difficult, because in this case, what also happens is that your prosecution is also continuing, because you are on the examination side also, you're responding to patent office's objections. Now you have to keep communicating to the patent office that, if we have satisfied you on all counts, on the prosecution side, your objections have been addressed, and the multiple oppositions which are coming have nothing additional to offer, because they're just nuisance creating, then nothing additional to offer. You can only plead before the patent office and ask the controller to actually reject these oppositions at the very go, or club the hearings together and finish them off in one go. But usually, practically this doesn't happen, because no patent controller wants to take it on their own head that, they did not give the right chance to the opponent. So these are the issues, these are the practical issues that patentees, that applicants have to face. And the applicants must on their own ensure that their claims are correctly drafted. They are also expeditiously proceeding with their application and not having it lingering on forever at the patent office, because that creates a very large window for opponents to file those oppositions in the first place.
Right, ma'am. Thank you. Ma'am, there are a few more questions. Would you like to take them now or at the end of the presentation?
Okay, as you say. I mean, I'm willing.
No, I'm just asking, just to if
so if there are only two questions, we can quickly finish them and move on.
Yes,
this is a different kind of yeah.
Ma'am, there's a question: when a researcher files a patent through the university or the institute, which supports the patentee, does the researcher have to bear the cost for fighting the grant opposition and all the oppositions?
Well, that is something which the university and the researcher have to agree upon before
Right.
before taking up the filing of the. But that has nothing to do with law. So it
Right.
has something. It is something that the that agreement has to be in place with the university.
Right, ma'am. And then there's another question which says, are there many precedents for pre-grant, post-grant oppositions for biotech patent cases wherein the opposition grounds are based on absence of approval from NBA or on the biological material used for the invention?
Yes, there are, and this is a ground. This is one of the grounds of that the source and nature of geographical origin has not been talked about. And any case, NBA. See, the issue of NBA doesn't come in the ground, but the fact that this has still not been completed, these formalities have not been completed, can be raised as part of that ground. And there are cases where people generally don't take one ground, they take multiple grounds, because that's what makes the strong opposition case. So it could be one of the major grounds.
Uh, Ma'am, I also wanted to ask one question. In fact, there are two questions. That how courts are goes about cases related to IPR, and are the same judges dealing with the cases of IPR as for other cases? And the second question is, do you think there should be dedicated chambers to deal the cases related to IPR? So, as you have a lot of experience in this field, so we want to what are your views about this?
So you're talking about the courts, or you're talking about the patent office? You're talking
Ma'am,
about the courts.
I'm talking about the courts, how they deal with the
With the
IPR issue.
So let's come to that question after I've done this second part, because this is on the enforcement of patents in India. So enforcement would mean that now you are enforcing or emphasizing your rights or asserting your rights which are granted to you by the patent in the Indian jurisdiction against any infringer. Now, whenever there is an act of infringement, and I'll come to that in the next slide, what actually amounts to infringement. Whenever there is an act of infringement, a patentee has the right, provided the patent is valid, the patent valid in the sense that patent is alive, all the fees are, so it is valid in the eyes of the patent office in terms of all the fees have been paid, it is alive. You have the right to initiate proceedings against the infringers. Now, those proceedings are before the courts, and we will see who the courts, what kind of courts they are, and your question might be addressed there. Okay. Now,
Right. Ma'am,
coming to this slide, yes.
ma'am, no, but we'll go forward. I'll ask my question later.
Okay. Now, coming to this slide where I've just kind of listed what could be the different acts which amount to patent infringement. And if you take the reverse of this, it would tell you that these are the rights that you have under the patent, right? Okay, to prevent other people to do this. And therefore, when anybody does it, it is an infringement of your patent rights. And these rights can accrue to you from the time of publication of your patent, but only can get effective after the patent has been granted. So you cannot initiate proceedings in the court before your patent is granted, but you can claim your damages. For example, if there were any loss of profit that you may have incurred, or the other party has gained immense profits because of that, and there are other things as well. So the damages can be calculated, and they can get accrued from the time of publication of your patent, but you can initiate suit proceedings only after the grant, right? So these are the different acts which amount to patent infringement, and a patentee can initiate suit proceedings in the courts. Now let's see what are the different exceptions to this, because there are certain exceptions to the infringement as well, and some people can take those defenses. If you're accusing somebody of infringement, they can come up with defenses. Now these are some of the defenses or some of the exceptions that are there, which are there in the act. So, for example, if your patent and invention has been used on foreign vessels or aircrafts, temporarily or accidentally within the territory of India. Then you have the an exception, which is the research exception, where you have, if it is only for the purposes of development and submission of information to regulatory authorities. Let's say you want to get some drug approved, and therefore you have used this particular information. And so these are some of those exceptions. And importation, once you have imported, once a person who's duly authorized by that by the patentee to do it, and then it further distributes the product to some other party, and that party gets sued, that party can take this exception. Then government use also, the government can actually use the patented article for its own use. Then there are research exemptions where you are actually just trying to showcase it for the purposes of experiment or research, and therefore you may not be called an infringer for this. Now, this is just a broad overview. You might find it a little confusing. I'll try to make it simpler for you. These are the type of hierarchy of the courts in India, the courts which handle the patent suits. Now, in 2015, based on an act which is called the Commercial Courts Act, IP was brought under the Commercial Acts, a commercial act. So, which means that there are some commercial benches, there are designated courts in the High Court as well as in the District Court, which only handle the IP along with other commercial matters. So therefore there is a fast tracking of some of these matters. We do not have a specialized IP court in India. We don't have special patent courts in India. The judge who's also hearing the criminal case or a civil case will also be dealing with the IP matters. However, because of this formation of these commercial benches, it becomes, these judges become a little more experienced in handling these matters. And over the years, there are certain judges, especially in the Delhi High Court and Mumbai High Court and some other major high courts, who have dealt with a large number of patent cases and IP cases in particular. Accordingly, they have become very experienced in this. And over the years, in the last 15 years, I would say 10 years or 15 years, it has improved very heavily. It's become very good and they are experienced. Also, they have a panel. They have a panel of scientific advisors. If at all they need any help on the technical front, the scientific advisors can be brought in. And also, they rely very heavily in patent matters on scientific experts. Like the technical experts on both sides can provide evidences and affidavits where they can vouch, they can verify data, they can bring up new technical data. So all these things happen in patent matters, especially. The courts, the judges don't do it on their own blindly. Patent matters really involve a lot of technical inputs as well. And especially the Delhi High Court is very experienced in handling such matters. Now here, if you just very quickly, IP infringement suit can be filed in a commercial division of a high court of original jurisdiction, but there are, some level of value which has associated to a suit. So based on that, either it can go to a district court or it can go to a commercial high court. If it goes to a district court and there is a counter claim filed by the defendant, it moves automatically to the high court. And then this goes up there for a division bench, which means a 2-judge bench. And then appeal goes then finally to the Supreme Court, which is the apex court. And these are other things which are like appeals resulting from the district court or from the other commercial courts here. So I don't want to spend too much time on it. It might be a little confusing, but you must have got the broad idea. What are the type of relief that you can get quickly? So one is the interim relief. When you're just filing a suit, you want some urgency. There's an urgency, you have a patent and you know that the competitor has launched a product in the market which is covered by your patent. And now you want some immediate relief that particular person should be stopped from marketing that particular product or launching in the market. So you can approach the court and you can showcase what is the urgency in the matter and what is the prima facie case that you can make. And an ex parte interim injunction can be got from the court. Ex parte means that only you approach the court and the court gives you that injunction, which means that it's like a stay for the other party to stop doing what it is doing till the time the matter goes to the merit, because the court will then look on the merits and everything and see whether your patent and etc. is actually covering it. There is a claim mapping which is happening with the product in question, and then only they will give you the final order. But interim reliefs can therefore be granted in many ways. Like, there is a appointment of a local commissioner who can go and see whether there are infringing products. Even seize and raids can happen, and those particular products can be confiscated. There can be a book which can be maintained, where the book of profits, etc., it can be, so all those things are there. Sometimes, the assets are frozen so that the defendant cannot even transfer the assets. So those are very case specific issues, but there are a lot of reliefs, interim reliefs, which the courts can grant to the patentee. Then there are permanent reliefs, permanent injunction, which means after you have done the trial, everything is done, and the infringer has to stop continuing the misuse of your IPR. And there could be some damages which are accruing to you. They can be granted to you by either looking at the account of profit or the loss, and then of course the destruction of the infringing material. But these are, in India, damage culture is not very high, so you may not get a big deal of a damage, but definitely at least the cost of the proceeding. And in many cases the courts have given some damages to the plaintiffs. In some cases, especially this is important in the trademark or the brands. For example, when there is some final injunction you have achieved, you can actually get the infringing material destroyed, because that is actually imitation material, or it's an infringing material which is not which is a fake. So those are the destruction orders that the court can give. That's a permanent relief for the. I think I'll just skip this because these are timelines and procedures. It's too procedural for you. I'll skip it. Then this is, as I said, evidences. Now, how to establish that your patent is getting infringed? So there are various things that you can do. Like, you can produce some test reports, you can produce expert affidavits, which state that this is particularly an infringing material. Claim mapping charts, of course, this is a must, because otherwise you will not be able to prove that this is a infringement. And I'm sure you are aware that the claim is what actually gives you the scope of right. So some of these things, you can produce and showcase your infringement. This is just a broad overview of in the engineering side in India. So these are some of the major companies who have been litigating together. And in the area of engineering, electronics and telecom specifically, there are a lot of companies which are litigating on patent matters, and some of these cases you may have already read about in the public domain, and they have successfully litigated against the infringers. Similarly, on the side of pharmaceuticals, so you can see there are a lot of innovator pharma companies which are litigating for enforcing their patented products in India against some of these listed defendants in the pharma side. So I think this is broadly what I wanted to talk about. There are a couple of case laws, but I'm not sure whether if I have the time or the bandwidth for you to understand all of this. So maybe we can pause here and, we can take some questions. And I think we have the next speaker as well lined up. So let me know if there are questions, then, we can take those. I think these case laws and all, I doubt that you might be really in a position to understand them at this stage. So I'm stopping the sharing of my screen now, Mamta.
Right. Ma'am, there's a question that says that if a patent is was filed in the New Delhi office under the jurisdiction of New Delhi office, but somebody violates it under the Kolkata jurisdiction, where should the patentee file the case? In New Delhi or in Kolkata?
So if you have an office here in New Delhi, if you have a place of jurisdiction in Delhi, you can initiate proceedings in Delhi. So you have to showcase your presence wherever, either at the site of the infringement or the place of your business.
Right. So then the onus is on the infringer to come and defend himself or herself.
Yes, true.
Ma'am, I have a question that if a patentee knows that there's a competitor who's mischievously filing pre-grant oppositions, and the patentee does know, is there anything that the patentee can do to report that the person who's filing the opposition? Can that person be reported?
So the patent, there is no such provision under the law really to do that. There is no rule or anything like that in the act to do that. The only thing that they can do is that bring it in the public domain and write to the patent office that this person has a tendency to do it. But
Right.
there is really no recourse, for to prevent this under the patent law. And in the from the IPAB, we do have certain case laws recently where the IPAB has really come back heavily on such Benami oppositions, for example, where proxy people have filed oppositions and they've come very, very heavily on such oppositions, and also asked the patent office to deal with them with a bit of caution and not encourage these kinds of filings. But other than that, we don't have any specific procedures where this can be dealt with.
Right. So, ma'am, I don't think there are any questions more as of now, but I'm sure as and when they keep pouring, we'll either communicate them to you. But for
So-
now,
So I think
Right.
I'm done with my session because I was conscious of the time and also the complexity of the topic, and I didn't want to go into too much of detail. I hope I was not able to. I was able to keep the interest alive at the same time, not complicated too much. So I'll be happy to receive any questions. My email address is deepa@knspartners.com, and Mamta and everybody there at the DST Center has my email address. I'll be happy to respond to them. I'm also available on LinkedIn. So, happy to interact with you all.
thank you so much, ma'am. That is a very interesting and insightful presentation. I mean, opposition and enforcement is something that we talk about very less, but definitely, researchers who are on the path of filing patents need to understand it very well. So that was very insightful. Thank you so much, ma'am.